Welcome back, everybody. This is Modern Randy. I am Randy, and today we're talking about the deck that took down the SCG Columbus Con here just last weekend. As always, guys, if you like what you're seeing, you like what I'm doing, go ahead and leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with everything that I'm posting, and let me know what you guys are taking to your RCQs. I'd love to hear what you guys are taking, what you guys are seeing. Let me know down in the comments below. But we are talking about the Caretaker's Talent mono whitelist that took down SCG Columbus Con this past weekend. It got first and second place, as well as only having 9 copies in the 270 decks that were in the whole event. So definitely overperformed for what it was doing. Seems to have a great matchup against the decks running around here, like the mid-range decks. Kind of been preying upon Demir and the Golgari decks essentially, and then doesn't have a terrible matchup against the aggro decks. So kind of just, you know, one of those decks that hits the trifecta of what you want to have game against. So, going over this deck as a whole, we'll start with, you know, the 2 big cards of this deck. Caretaker Talent is obviously the main one. It's what the deck is basically named after. So, for 2 and a white, you get an enchantment class card that has whenever 1 or more tokens you control enter the battlefield, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Notably, you can trigger this on your turn as well as your opponent's turn to draw an additional, you know, 2 cards throughout the turn cycle. And then it has, you can level up for 1 white mana. You get to create a token as a copy of target token you control, which obviously will trigger, you know, Caretaker's Talent first ability and draw a card. Super nice. And then for 3 and a white, you get creature tokens you control get +2/+2. So obviously that really helps you, you know, turn the corner and essentially close out the game pretty fast when all your 1/1s now become 3/3s or your 2/2s become 4/4s. You're just now you're hyper accelerating the game. You're closing the game out as fast as possible. And then to go along with that, we also have Enduring Innocence here. So it is a 2/1 for 1 generic and 2 white. Enchantment creature, lifelink. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control enter with power 2 or less, draw a card. Again, only triggers once each turn. Notably, you can do it on both your turn and your opponent's turn. And then when it dies, if it was a creature, you can return it to the battlefield under its owner's control as an enchantment. So essentially making this harder for people to interact with and being another good draw engine for the deck. Now, to go along with this, we are playing 25 lands. We're playing 18 basic planes along with 4 fountain ports and 4 sunken citadels. Obviously, sunken citadels is great with being able to have 2 mana instead of 1 to help power up our fountain ports. So, you know, taps for a colorless, not the best, but for 2 mana we can sacrifice a token and draw a card. For 3 and a life, we can create a blue fist creature token, which again helps trigger Caretaker's Talent and Enduring Innocence on our opponent's turn. So we're just drawing those extra cards. We're saying a headed card advantage. We're finding our removal spells. We're finding our creatures. We're finding whatever we need to help beat our opponent by being able to do this. And then you can also pay 4 and make a treasure token, which notably still triggers Caretaker's Talent because it is a token. To go along with our 2 drops early game here, we have 4 Carrot Cakes. This card is something that looks really bad on paper, but is really good the more and more you play with it. And especially when you have a Caretaker's Talent or Enduring Innocence out, it just really helps smooth out the draws because when it comes into play, it's a 1 and a white artifact food. When it enters, when it enters or when you sacrifice it, you create a 1/1 white rabbit token and scry 1. So it's helping you produce blockers, helping you trigger Caretaker's Talent, Enduring Innocence, as well as smoothing out your draws by getting that scry 1 as well. It also has the ability to pay 2 and tap it, sacrifice it, you gain 3 life. Notably too, this just says when you sacrifice it, so if your opponent makes you sacrifice an artifact for some reason or sacrifice it somehow, you still get that 1/1 and scry 1. So super good overall, just value card here that looks bad on paper, but the more you play with it, the more you realize why it's in this deck and why it's so good. Then we're also playing 2 Virtue of Loyalty. So this is 1 and a white instant, create a 2/2 white knight token with Vigilance. Obviously good for triggering Enduring Innocence, triggering Caretaker's Talent on our opponent's turn. And then for 5 mana, 3 and 2 white, it becomes, you can cast it as the enchantment, and then at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, untap those creatures. Obviously, this gets out of hand pretty fast when we're making our 1/1s into 2/2s and the 3/3s, and we have, you know, the level 3 going on Caretaker's Talent. We're just closing out games at rapid speed. We're just killing them as fast as we can. Now, to help along with our 4 drops here, we have 4 Biza, the Bounding Spring, 2 and 2 white for a 4/5 legendary creature. When it enters the battlefield, create a treasure token if your opponent controls more lands than you, gain 4 life if your opponent has more life than you, make 2 fists if your opponent has more creatures than you, and draw a card if the opponent has more cards in hand than you. So this card is great at catching us up in the early game. The life gain is the biggest part against all these aggressive decks running around, as well as in the late game when you just need to really gas back up. Maybe they got rid of your Caretaker's talent, or you just haven't drawn a Caretaker's talent, or during Innocence, being able to draw an extra card, make some tokens, gain some life, and just kind of stabilizing that mid to late game is also huge. We're also playing one Overlord of the Mistmoors, just another good solid 4-drop as well as a 7-drop. So obviously it has that impending for 2 and 2 white. And then, obviously when it comes into play or attacks, you get to make 2/1 white insect flying creature tokens, just kind of like the Grave Titan of white, essentially. So super powerful card, makes sense why we'd be running one of them. And then 2 Elspeths, or Archangel Elspeth. This card is a powerhouse and is definitely a 1-2 punch when you have when you go like turn 3 Enduring Innocence, turn 4 Archangel Elspeth, or Caretaker's Talent into Elspeth. Just super powerful, can just win the game by itself with just those 2 cards. So for 2 and 2 white, you get a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. So he has a +1 to give your creature +1, or sorry, to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. -2, you get to put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Becomes an angel addition to each other types and gains flying. And then -6, return all non-land permanent cards from your graveyard with 3 or less. Mana value 3 or less. So obviously it does help with if they get rid of our Caretaker's Talent, kill our Enduring Innocence and it goes to the graveyard, or get it back in our Carrot Cakes. Just that extra value you can get from that type of thing. Card's super powerful. It's almost a card I would want to go up to 3 of, but 3 feels too clunky in the deck with it. I will say that for sure after playing this deck for a little while. 3 does feel a little bit too much, so I see why we're at 2, but it's a super powerful card. For our removal spells, though, we get to play probably what is the best removal spell in Standard at this time, is Lay Down Arms. So it's a 1-mana sorcery, exile creature, or target creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of planes you control. A controller gains 3 life. So obviously we're running 18 planes, so that way that we can be able to almost always kill every creature on curve. Notably, it exiles as well, which is huge. So, they're not getting triggers off their hero. They're not getting any kind of value off of death triggers. Just super, super efficient removal spell. We're also playing 2 Soul Partition, 1 in a white, instant, exile target non-land permanent for as long as that card remains exile. Its owner may play it. A spell cast by an opponent this way costs 2 more to cast. So notably, we can target our own stuff. So if they go to, exile our Enduring Innocence, or if they go to kill our Caretaker's Talent or Archangel Elspeth, whatever the case may be, we can just exile our own permanent instead and then recast it, for that 3 cost or 4 cost, whatever it was, because we are not an opponent, or we're not the opponent, we don't have to pay that 2 extra costs to cast it. So super good at protecting our own spells as well as getting rid of problematic stuff from our opponent and slowing them down. And then we're also playing for Get Lost, because obviously that's another great card to play, being able to destroy a creature, enchantment, or planeswalker. Your opponent does get 2 maps. That is not nothing to give them. That can add up. It can be a lot of chip damage. You have to make sure, you're being careful of that, making sure that, what you're killing makes sense in that regard. And then, of course, we're playing for Sunfall, because it is the best board wipe probably ever printed. At this point, it's pretty close to being the best board wipe ever printed. Notably, when you make that Incubate token as well, it does trigger Caretaker's Talent, because it is a token you are making, so you get even extra value with that. That being said, I think this deck is super well positioned. This was the list that took down SCG Columbus, that 10K, this past weekend. So not too surprising to see this deck do well. It really preys upon the Demir mid-range and the Golgari mid-range that we're seeing run around. This deck just has super efficient removal. Like I said, we have the Lay Down Arms and Get Lost to be able to answer pretty much any problematic creature or permanent. Sunfall to wipe away the board really easily. And then we have a lot of card draw in this deck with Enduring Innocence and Caretaker's Talent. Caretaker's Talent really proving just how good it can be. I mean, it's essentially a 3-mana do-nothing enchantment on turn 3, and it's still the seeing its play as a 4 of. Super powerful card as a whole. So, just a really powerful deck. It's really well positioned. It even has game against the aggro decks as well. Like I said, this deck was able to take down the SCG Con 10K. It's also been doing up numbers in the challenges as well. So it just feels like this is where you want to be as it stands right now if you're expecting a lot of mid-range and learning how to play through those mid-range grind decks. That being said, we also had a sideboard here just, to add more insult to injury. So for the super, the aggro matchups, essentially we have 2 Authorities of Council, one of the new cards to come out of Foundations. So being able to make our opponent's creatures enter tapped, and then whenever a creature an opponent controls enters, you gain 1 life for 1 white mana. So this just helps go along with the lay down arms, right? Like the biggest drawback to lay down arms is it is a sorcery speed card. Well, if all my opponent's creatures are entering and play tapped, being able to then have the best removal spell on my turn to answer that is just amazing. We're also playing 3 Elspeth's Smites to be able to deal 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creature, and get to exile it instead if it would die. So just, a good efficient removal. We're playing 2 Exercise as well. This is 1 in a white sorcery, exile, artifact enchantment, or the big creatures that are problematic. Playing 3 Rest in Peace here for the blue-white Oculus deck, as well as any other graveyard shenanigans that might be running around. 2 Boon Bringer Valkyrie. Ooh. So 3 and 2 white for an Angel Warrior 4/4 with a backup 1. So when this creature enters, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. If it's another creature, it gains the following abilities on your turn: flying, first strike, and lifelink. So being able to do a massive life swing is huge with this deck, especially against the red decks. Being able to go, turn 4 Beza, gain 4 life into turn 5 Moonbringer, give the Beza a +1/+1 counter. Now you're swinging for 5 flying, first damage. Now you just had a 9 life point swing in a matter of 2 turns. Super amazing to do. Also, it's just a good value creature by itself. We're also playing 1 temporary lockdown, again for those aggro decks or any of the small decks running around, the Jeskai Convoke deck running around. And the same thing with Split Up here is good for those, Jeskai Convoke decks, the aggro decks running around, things like that. Just being able to do a one-sided board wipe, essentially. Their creatures are tapped, you're going to destroy all tapped creatures. Now my tokens get to live, or my other big creatures get to live. Or vice versa, you swung in to make them have to chump block or something a little bit, and then just be able to wipe out all their untapped creatures, things like that. Just a good value board wipe spell. But overall, this is a deck that did take down SCG Columbus. It's doing well in the challenges. I think this is probably a deck where you want to be at if you are expecting a lot of mid-range decks to be running around, which I expect to be the case moving forward. We've seen Golgari doing super well. Just got Llanowar Elves, is playing the Demon package to get a lot of card draw going. And then we see, obviously Dimir mid-range is doing super well. It has Kaido, it has cheap efficient creatures, it has some counter spells. So just a deck that is very good at grinding out the games and getting more card advantage, more value than your opponent's going to get from their spells. That being said, probably one of the biggest weaknesses for this deck is not being able to close out games that fast. So when you go against the domain decks, they can be more challenging just with what they have to offer, what they are able to do. So that is a little bit of a worrisome. If you expect a lot of domain, I would not be taking the Caretaker talent deck. But if you're expecting the normal, Golgari, Domir mid-range decks running around, and the Boros aggro deck running around, the mono red aggro deck running around, this is definitely the deck that you want to take. Like I said, you got plenty of life gain for the aggro decks. You have plenty of efficient removal and card draw for the mid-range decks. You just kind of have it all. This is essentially the control deck of the format right now, or in the format right now. So it's definitely something you want to take if you're expecting the mid-range and aggro decks as it stands. But as always, guys, if you like what you're seeing, you like what I'm doing, go ahead and leave a like on this video. Subscribe to my channel to keep up with everything I'm posting. And let me know what you plan to take to your next RCQ. I'd love to hear from you.